Well, thank you all for joining us. It's really great to be here. I kind of love the format of these Zoom calls, only not actually physically, but I like the fact that we can speak across the waters and really have a conversation regardless of geographical context. So it's really great to be here with you, Dora. And my name is Dina Beard. I'm the director of the lab, which I'm sitting in right now. It was a little bit better of a context than being in my bedroom. So thank you for joining me here. And for those of you who don't know, the lab is an experimental art space in San Francisco. We do regular sound, film, dance, and visual arts programs. Aside from that, we also give $20,000 to $100,000 grants each every year to a few artists, and those are unrestricted funds. So they come alongside keys to the space and the option to revise every aspect of our operations. And this idea is to really allow the institution to empower the artist's practice rather than the other way around. So we feel like the artwork here is really the thing that we are working towards rather than the institution building side of it. But of course, during the pandemic, we don't really have the opportunity to gather as we once did. So we started these online forums as a way to reimagine how we share ideas across many different social and geographical contexts. And each of our speakers has presented on their tactics of coping and refusal in the difficult times we live in that are definitely always part of their ongoing practice. And in response, the listeners have been sharing their own responses. And so these forums really propose that the project of freedom is a project of actively making a world with others. So we really want to hear this back and forth, this Q&A, this response from each of you during these calls. So please use the Q&A function as a part of the Zoom call if you're on the Zoom platform. If you're not on the Zoom platform, I'll keep paying attention to the YouTube comments section. So we'll try to integrate as many of these questions or proposals for Dora as possible after she presents on her thoughts and ideas. So Dora García is an artist that I think alongside constantly. I discovered her work back during the days of Occupy Oakland and of sitting in the mud with people who were similarly frustrated with the inequities and horrors of American despotism. So Lawless and Marginal, the occupation in Oakland was a collection of divergent stories, both told and untold, all of us refusing to use public space to make common sense. So Garcia's work is largely performative and deals with similar issues related to community and individuality in contemporary society, exploring the political potential of marginal positions, paying homage to eccentric characters and anti-heroes. So Dora García lives and works in Barcelona and Oslo. Currently, you're in Barcelona right now. García represented Spain at the Venice Biennale in 2011 and participated in the Venice Biennale for the second time in 2013. She took part in the 56th Venice International Art Exhibition, Documenta 13, and other international events such as Skulptur Projecte Münster in 2007, the Biennale of Sydney in 2008, and the Sao Paulo Biennale in 2008 and 2010. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Dora, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dina, and thanks for the people that are present now. Dina, you're now gone. Now it's a bit like if I'm talking into the void. So thanks for being there. I will try my best to do a talk, however strange this is. I wanted, when Dina asked me, I wanted to do a talk on the figure of the dropout and how you drop out from whatever system you're in. And then things catch up, reality catches up with you. And then I thought, no, I should do rather a talk on how the system of art has to change due to this period that we all have been going through, and we are still going through the epidemics of the coronavirus, and then what is going on now in the States with the assassination of Mr. Joyce also caught up with me, and then all of a sudden everything, all priorities change, and we are in a kind of period where priorities are changing all the time, and whatever you held as extremely important 2 weeks ago, all of a sudden has absolutely no importance anymore, and then you have to quickly reorganize your life, reorganize your way of thinking. So it's really a time with no certainties at all, which is probably a good thing. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, that's just the way it is. However, I'm going to periodically share a screen and then go back to talking because I wanted to show you some things. I wanted to start with this quote of Hannah Arendt that is more or less good for everything. And it's good for now too. So it is from the Origins of Totalitarianism, chapter 5, the political emancipation of the bourgeoisie, power and the bourgeoisie. And it says, the most radical and the only secure form of possession is destruction. For only what we have destroyed is safely and forever ours. Property owners who do not consume but strive to enlarge their holdings continually find one very inconvenient limitation, the unfortunate fact that men must die. The finiteness of personal life is as serious a challenge to property as the foundation of society, as the limits of the globe are a challenge to expansion as the foundation of the body politic. So this idea that death is that thing that really finally ends the endless ambitions of capitalism and the endless ambitions of imperialism is a curious thing, and in a way what we have been confronted with when all of a sudden an event of the proportions of the epidemics ends all our endless ambition, and then we have to figure out how to continue from there with something that makes sense. Then this sentence that maybe you have seen when advertising the talk today, I wrote nothing doesn't matter. So this is a sentence. I'm going to go back to my face, which is maybe good that you see when I'm talking. This sentence is an entry of the Russian writer, a text written by the Russian writer Daniel Karms, which is a Russian poet of tragic and short life. And he wrote this in January 9, 1937, these two sentences. Today I wrote nothing, doesn't matter. He was someone strange to everything, strange to the world as well. He was saying, my philosophy is deeply hostile to the present. When he wrote these two lines, he was already kind of exiled from his business as a writer. He was stamped as anti-Soviet. He was not allowed to publish, not even the children stories that he was for a while allowed to publish, and a sort of calm came over him with this impossibility to publish. He was saying that, and this is something that many artists will recognize, you always have this kind of uneasiness that impels you to work, and you feel incredibly guilty when you are not working. But when it is really impossible to work, then all of a sudden everything is calm. He was saying, I was most happy when pen and paper were taken from me and I was forbidden from doing anything. I had no anxiety about doing nothing by my own fault. My conscience was clear and I was happy. This was the time when I was in prison. So, of course, with all the necessary distances, this is a bit what happens when for me, on 14 March this year, the Spanish government decreed confinement, absolute confinement for everybody, and everything had to be closed down. And my endless traveling, my endless working, and my endless teaching, and all the things that I was doing had to stop suddenly. And I was happy because it was not by my own fault. It was something that I had no other possibility than doing. And a bit this is what I'm going to talk about by means of two works. What does exactly mean to stop, and how this brings a new paradigm in writing. So as I was saying, at the time of the confinement, I was having a full-time job teaching in Oslo and in Geneva. I was having also, of course, a full-time job as an artist, doing exhibitions, doing talks, public commissions sometimes, this kind of stuff. At the same time, as many people, I also had a family life that demanded a lot a lot of time. So one could see that I had two full-time jobs and a lot of other things in my head. And I had been able to manage this for 10 years, but then lately I was not managing so well. And at the time that the epidemics came, I was having a lot of trouble to sleep. I was having panic attacks. So something had broken a bit, and I was not feeling well. And like many people, I was, because this is something that I have, many people I know have experienced, I was wondering how could I continue with everything I needed to do. And similarly with my body, that was saying that that was not possible anymore. And then just then the confinement came. And then just then I was on my own, and I could have time for a lot of things, being as I was forced to stop. Curiously, even if I had been enormously productive in my life, I have done a lot of exhibitions, I have done a lot of books, I have done films, I have really felt a lot this urge to produce. I have always had a fascination for artists who don't produce anything, for what they are called the artists of the no, or the artists of the refusal. I had presented, as Dina was saying, I had presented in 2011. I was representing Spain in the Venice Biennale, and I had presented a award that was called the Inadequate, that occupied the Spanish pavilion in 2011. And within this work of the Inadequate, there was a piece that was called The Artist Without Works, a guided tour around nothing. So this was speaking about an artist who did not produce anything. It was a monologue, and this was the opening of the monologue. You have come here hoping for what most artists are ready to give you, a generous flow of artworks being displayed in front of your eyes. I'd like to tell you about these artists that will let you go empty-handed and empty-eyed. The Artist Without Works, a guided tour around nothing, is exactly what the title says it is, a guided tour of the works of an artist who doesn't produce any. This artist's rejection of the game's most fundamental rule, which is to show something, is an attempt to get beyond Francis Picavia's evil, atrocious, and supposedly exhaustive alternative. Artists can be divided into two categories, the failed and the unknown. So this is how the work was presented. This is the performance here carried out by Michelangelo Micolisa, and I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the other actor who was translated into Italian. There is next to that another work, Insta Narrative. So this was presented every day at 4 o'clock in the Spanish pavilion. And next to that, there was an incredible amount of activity that went on for 6 months. This is how the exhibition was presented, and a 6-month long performance where every day is different from the next. So I have broken a series of rules in this pavilion, like it was that my name did not appear anywhere, that there were no vinyls at all on the walls, there were no explanations whatsoever, and it was somehow making it impossible for the public of Venice to attend or to visit the exhibition following this kind of frenzy that researchers have come to establish the median time that a visitor spends in front of an artwork in the Venice Biennale as 12 seconds. This is the media. So everything in this pavilion was made to make impossible this kind of attention and to force people who, of course, free to follow or not to follow what was going on in the pavilion, they were forced to stay and to spend time there. And it was, as a rule, it was not translated, it was not amplified, and it was also not recorded. So the only way to experience what was going on in the pavilion was really to stay there, to make an effort in many different ways to understand what was going on, whether the problem was language or something else. And of course, to afterwards, whatever documentation was your own experience of what was going on there and the way you spoke about it. So it was a very, I think I go back to my face. It was a very sui generis, a very strange pavilion for what was usual, for what is usual there, because it didn't seem to advance. It was really not the idea to advance the career of an artist. but it was really to turn the pavilion into a kind of a tool of research to understand what was at stake, what was going on, what we were doing there, what was the Italian landscape, what was meant to refuse this schema or this construction of the national representation, all these kind of things. So I was doing this, and at the same time, as usual, I was feeling a sort of uneasiness, because I felt that I could do this. I was allowed to do this for two reasons. As I was saying, as the writer, my friend Andrea Valdez says. Sorry, I'm going to share the screen again for you to see it. To enjoy refusal, which was this kind of refusal I was doing, one has to display privilege first. So I was I was indeed enjoying a certain privilege that allowed me to do this refusal. One of the privileges was, if you can say, that I was a woman, and I experience as a privilege this famous sentence of the guerrilla girls that say the privilege or the advantage of being a woman artist, that you never have to suffer the embarrassment of being called a genius. And so let's say that I never felt the pressure that other artists I knew felt when being in a pavilion of, the market pressure. To feel that, the dealers had put so much money or had invested so much money into you that you somehow had to give back some of that money that they had invested into you. So no dealer had invested any money into me. No one was expecting me to do any money. Therefore, I had zero pressure to somehow make a profit from all of it. And another privilege that I was enjoying, it was, of course, that I was given this stage. I was given this stage of the Spanish Pavilion. And of course, the refusal could only be done because I had been given this stage. For 1,000 other artists, they could never refuse what has never been given to them. So I was feeling uneasy about this privilege. And my only way to justify this privilege, and you have to forgive me because it's very strange to speak without seeing any faces, without having any echoes. But my only way to justify for myself was this privilege was to think that I was part of a group, that I was working with several people, as it was the case, because there was many people that were collaborating in the Spanish Pavilion, from the conception to the construction to the everyday performance to the feedback of the performance of every day. So they were really a group of people that could be in the about 60 people that were working on this. And I just could overcome these two privileges that made me so uneasy, because I felt responsible for them, and a bit like the boss of a circus, or a bit like the central figure of a film production company. I had to be there every day in order to ensure that they were properly paid, that they were well treated, that they got what they invested on this. And so it was a collective endeavor, even if I was the initiator of this. And this is a kind of construction that I have used often, to think of myself as the initiator of something, and but of course to consider the work as something that was made by many people. This is what helped me to overcome my malaise of being part of this system, which is nevertheless a part of. So I was at the center of a network of labor, being responsible in this production network that substituted an artist atelier for a group of people. I had the responsibility to administer public money, the pavilion budget, among a group of professionals, the network of collaborators, and the economic compensation was equal for me and for them. Everybody that was part of this was getting exactly the same amount of money, me as an artist and everybody else as whatever they were working on in the pavilion. So this idea of the equal compensation was also something that could be seen maybe as generous by others, but in fact was just something that I was using to calm the angst that produced in me to be part of this system. So it was an egoistic, after all, an egoistic reason for this. And then this is one of the case studies. And the second case study I wanted to bring up for your consideration was the Aichi Triennial, which is much more recent, it's from last year. And in the Aichi Triennial in Nagoya last year in Japan, I presented a work that was called The Romeos. And The Romeos is a performance which is made of two parts, a printed matter, which is in the form of flyers, posters, all sorts of things, and the performance itself. Everybody gets to know what is going on through the printed matter. So everybody knows that there is a group of young men, attractive young men, that are in charge of making the people time the visit of the exhibition, or maybe the visit to the city, because they are as well in outside of the institution, as something pleasant, to give attention to them, to make them feel attractive and important. So one could understand this as a sort of host that makes your life pleasant, agreeable. Agreeable is that English, I don't know. Something that you enjoy because you can see that someone of the characteristic of a Romeo, that means a young, intelligent, well-educated, handsome person is giving all the attention to you. So this is the performance of the Romeos that was meant as a sort of accompaniment of the visitors of the biennial. Following, this is not something that is important for us now, a strategy of the Cold War that was as well called the Romeos, and that was meant similar, with a similar structure. Anyway, this Romeos was my contribution to the Aichi Triennial. If you want to know more about it, then we will have the questions afterwards. But when all this, in this reorganization of priorities, when everything was settled and everybody was so pleased about the Romeos and everything was running so well, then something happened that you may have heard of, and that was the closing of the one part of the exhibition, because they were exhibiting Girl of Peace, which is this sculpture that you have there. On your screens, I guess now, and which is a image made by artists to commemorate the what is called the Comfort Women episode. That means forced prostitution by the Japanese army in several countries, but especially in Korea, where a large number of women were forced to provide sexual company for the soldiers, and it was never acknowledged by the Japanese government. And these women that suffer both, of course, what they suffer, the violence that they suffer at the hands of the Japanese army, and then the reject of their communities when the war was over, because they were considered Japanese whores and they were rejected by their community. They carried this suffering for decades and decades, and they were never got a satisfaction with the Japanese government, not even the satisfaction of an apology, until the last one died. And when the last one died, nothing was left of this demonstration. They carried on, and this was taken over by artists. So to my enormous surprise, this is still not recognized by the Japanese government, and the level of violence that the exhibition reached by people who wanted to, from killing the curator to burning the whole thing down, placing a bomb in order to for people not to see this sculpture, made that this part of the exhibition was closed. And then all the artists signed a letter of solidarity with the artists of the. I'm sorry, but I just cannot remember the name of the artists, of the two artists who made this piece, because I'm unable to remember Korean names, Japanese names. I'm sorry, they were Japanese artists. They signed a letter in solidarity, but a group of artists decided that that was not enough, and what we should do was to close our works. So that means not really leave, but suspend the works until that part of the exhibition that was closed was open again. And then it was, as I say, everything was, I was in a big conflict, because as most of the other artists, they could just turn off their films, close the rooms where the exhibition was where their work was presented. I had to 12 people that were depending on me, the performers. So the performers that I have discussed with, that I have discussed with, or how to carry on the performance, and they were also contracted by the triennial to work for 4 months in a triennial. Then I couldn't just say, go home, it's finished, you don't have a job anymore, we have to close it. So that was, I found a way to deal with this in discussion with the performers. This brought, of course, a completely different level to the exhibition, to the exhibition as far as my performance was concerned, and it also brought to me the notion that is what I wanted to bring to this discussion, that this was a direct consequence of this system, of this triennalization, biennalization system, in which you fly artists from everywhere in the world. You land in a place that you don't understand anything about. You present your work, and then when there is trouble, then you can just suspend your work and not attend the consequences because you are not there anymore. You already flew away to wherever you were coming from. And the ones that are left to deal with the consequences is the staff. So in this case, as it is the case, one could say in Japan, but actually all over the world, the ones that really had to suffer the consequences of the violence of the extreme right, the violence of visitors who protested because a third of the exhibition was closed because of the solidarity of the artists. The ones that are left to fence for this are the female, super well-educated, young assistant curators that are the ones that are every day in the exhibition space, that are the ones that have to face their phone calls, that have to face the press, that have to face everything. And the curator, which also has the main curator, that of course also has, how to say, a hard time. I had to deal with it, but he was not there every day. The ones that were there every day were these young, super, extremely well-educated young women that had to deal with the violence each day. But of course, none of the artists that were not there anymore had to deal with this. And it was, in a way, an easy thing to do, to say, just close down my piece, and when the censorship is not there anymore, then I will open it again. It was a super complicated situation, and I was thinking, we as artists, we don't have the possibility to understand the complexity of the situation because we don't belong to this context, but we also haven't given nor the time nor the possibility to really understand what the context is, the historical context, the social context of the time, etc. And this is a direct consequence of this sort of system of the flying artists all over the world, the pressure of the opening, the fact that most of the things are planning for these first days of the opening. And then I go back to a text. I go to a text that was published by Marco Baravalle recently. That is published in the Institute the Institute of Radical Imagination. In this text that is called "On the Biennial Ruins," he makes some quite interesting points. He says, for instance, I don't remember anymore what I have in my PowerPoint. Let me see. When, if not now, he's saying, referring to this time, when, if not now, should we try to abandon the paradigm of growth attached to the neoliberal concept of the event? So he says, the revolution of art institutions could only be initiated by and will only march parallel to a much wider revolution, a revolution able to make significant steps forward on different yet interconnected grounds: the achievement of a universal basic income, a new housing rights, a serious commitment on climate justice towards the end of extractivism, the reconstruction of a democratic healthcare system damaged by decades of privatizations, the end of gender, race, class, and species asymmetries. This especially resounds with us now, all elements that structure and permeate the current social, financial, and political order. So this is the thing. We are confronted with an extreme change in our lives, and obviously nothing will be continuous normal. And we are given the opportunity to change things. But when we are asked, like many of us artists have been asked, How has this epidemics changed your work? How do you think you will survive? Always thinking that you are supposed not to sell any work or this kind of thing. What is going to change? The change that we have to bring to our own work as an artist, the change that we have to bring to the institution cannot be a change that is isolated. It's a change that has to be communicated with all other changes. Otherwise, there is no change, if not change all over the place. How will this new paradigm be? This is a bit the question that we should, I'm sorry, because I have so many things here and I cannot really read things. Okay, now I can see myself and I hope that you see it as well. So how would this be, this new institution, how would this be this new practice of artists that could avoid this kind of situations as the ones lived in the Aichi Triennial? How could we be able to anchor our work and our practice to the places where these works and this practice is shown? How could we be one with the context? How could we be really responding to real and relevant problems, that real and relevant issues that have to do with a place, with a territory, and not with this kind of clouds floating all over the planet, literally, and in which what is called the international art world is supposed to be. So this is a suggestion of Marco Baravalle in this text of In the Biennial Ruins. The idea intends to shift attention from the showing to the inhabiting, allowing a new space-time dimension for projects that want to engage with the context and that until now too often result in paternalistic and unattended social counseling. This model ideally could also generate a labor force less obsessed by the frenetic deadline fever of the neoliberal event, by its nature concentrated on the vernissage and the finissage. I mean, truer words were hardly ever spoken. This is what I felt when I read the text of Marco Baravalle, this deadline fever of the neoliberal event by its nature concentrated on the vernissage and the finissage, which is something that it was so present for me in the pavilion, not the idea that after 1 week of absolute madness, there was all of a sudden absolutely nothing, and there was nothing left, and there were no artists left, and there was nobody left, and there was a completely different rhythm started in the Biennale. The same thing as in the Aichi Triennial that I was telling you about after when the thing happened, that was right when the closing down of this part of the exhibition happened, that was right after the finissage. Nobody was there anymore. Nobody was there anymore. So all you had to do was to call and say, please close my piece in solidarity with the censorship. And that was all you had to do. Everything else was happening in a completely different space and dimension where other people were left to face with the problem. So the same way as our uninterrupted intellectual activity is only made possible because of an army of less privileged people, precarious workers, cleaning our houses, cooking our meals, we must understand that our archipelagos of abstract and flexible artistic labor, which are used as models for the ideal neoliberal freelance worker, are only possible because they are surrounded by an ocean of exploitation. So I wanted to finish with this image of 2016, if I remember well, at the lab with residents I did at the lab where we started the Hearing Voices Cafe Lab, or the Hearing Voices Lab, I think it was just called, where we met with different collectives and different groups of people in this model of the Hearing Voices Lab. I think specifically here, I'm not sure of what we're doing here. I think this was with the Hearing Voices Network of San Francisco. We also did readings. It was 1 week long of different meetings with students as well that came with me from Geneva. So this was, to me, it was the image I wanted to choose as my clumsy attempts for this inhabiting that Marco Baravalle is talking about. All of them clumsy inhabitants, clumsy attempts for the inhabiting model were the inadequate in Venice, the Romeos in the Aichi Triennial, and it was as well the Hearing Voices Cafe here in the San Francisco version of the Hearing Voices Lab. So I want to finish now because I would like to open for questions, which I think is going to be probably much more human, that is my talking into the void with the sentence, we must not deconfine until the revolution is well underway. I think it's well underway. Until the revolution is well underway, the revolution of everyone and of everything. So that would be a bit the last sentence of my intervention. And then from now on, I hope we have some other voices in the discussion. Please.
Thank you so much. It's nice. I know it's so disconcerting not to be able to see faces and voices and any kind of response on this platform. That was absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And so I just want to let people who are listening in know that you can type in to the Q&A portion of the Zoom any comments or questions or ideas, or to the YouTube comments page. It looks like Catherine Sherman raised her hand here, so I'm gonna see if I can figure this out. Just by way of context too, there's been an incredible, I think, shift in our tactics of how we meet together and how we gather and how we study. And I found, especially when the Hearing Voices came to San Francisco to the lab, that I kind of had to re-engage with this kind of sitting and listening and being a part of a kind of living, breathing organism that was at the lab space for that, I think it was a week or 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And it was extraordinary because, we have all the context of the chaos going on around us, but this just sitting and listening and waiting and hearing each other was just absolutely liberatory. And it was similar, I think, at the protest last night in Oakland, the protests against George Floyd. When they started shooting off the tear gas, I think everybody started checking in with each other more. There was much more of a conversation of looking to your neighbor and asking them how they were doing. I felt like there was a deeper conversation. I mean, maybe as a result of the pandemic and the fact that we are kind of so engaged with people when we actually do see them in real life. Have you seen that in Barcelona?
Well, I think, already for a few years, the word care is like a key word in the discussion in the arts. And it's like all of a sudden, all this went on steroids very, very fast. Now there is the paradigm, there has been different interviews I've been reading. The paradigm for the museum is the hospital. So I said we have to think of the museum as hospitals in which we take care of each other. And of course, one has to think of these words so that it does not become empty words again, because it has been, as I say, going on for a long time, this idea of the care. I think in Barcelona, there was, of course, we had our riots as well last year. With the repression of the police, with the imprisonment of political prisoners in Catalonia, and so we had our deal with this. Now it all seemed to, again, this came to a second row because of the pandemics. And of course, now you have this idea when you ask somebody, how are you? Actually, you're really interested. It is like you want them to tell you how they are. And before it was like, it is just, you just have to say fine. And if you're not fine, you just say fine because no one wants to hear your stories. But now people really want to hear your stories, and you really, so it is a big shift, and it is also a big shift on the idea of the meaning of territory, because all of a sudden it is by no means clear, hopefully and happily, that we're ever going to go back to the kind of the jet system of flying people. I have been doing things like going in the morning to Istanbul and in the evening to Geneva, And this was like normal. I said, I think I can find you another flight passing by London, and then you will be in time for this other meeting you have. And it was, this is something that, thanks God, it seems that people start to understand it doesn't make any sense, because now all of a sudden people realize that actually you can do a webinar, and I can go to a jury, and they don't have to do the whole stuff. And this is something that defines completely territory in a completely different way. And this is a good thing. So, I mean, I find a lot of good things in the situation. Of course, there is an absolutely not a good thing. There is a lot of people has died. That's not so, but there is a kind of back to your senses, I think, as Hannah Arendt was saying.
Yes, absolutely. We have a couple questions now. Edith Duve says, hello both, and great talk, Dora, and very important issues that you raise. Would you suggest to move away from all kinds of biennials and other large exhibitions, such as the upcoming Documenta and such?
Upcoming what?
Documenta. Would you suggest moving away from all kinds of biennials?
I don't know. I cannot suggest anything. I think there will be, you can't, how to say, you have a lot to respond to. Mm-hmm. So I don't think you can do the things anymore the way they were. So you are going to be asked the carbon imprint of your exhibition, for instance. You're going to have to respond for that, and that will change how things are done. Marco Baravalle was suggesting this idea of turning things into where people can really go less artists, more time. Mm-hmm. Which to me sounds like a great, fantastic situation. So less artists, more time, not to go, just not to do these crazy things, and also not to do the week opening event where practically everyone in the world meets in that place, and then they fly over to the next meeting, but like slow down and less artists, more time. More time, I think this is a key thing. And to be with your feet on the ground is another thing, and to slow down travel. That's I think to me this is absolutely vital. And I think when you don't do that, you will be asked why you didn't do that. You will have to answer for that. So I think, but of course I don't pretend that they cancel Documenta. No, I guess maybe we can go back to the Documenta of the 50s. Yeah,
that's great. Lucy asks, can you say more about the connection between dropping out, quitting, and privilege?
Yes. I mean, it's a complex thing. Of course, if you think of what the quote of Picabia, artists can be divided in two categories: the fail and the unknown. We don't know anything about the unknown. So when you do not have the arena, you may drop out and no one will notice. So in order to drop out as a political act, you need first to have the arena for you. That's one thing. You could go more existential and say, well, no, I can drop out. I don't care. I'm such a radical dropout that I don't care if people notice or not. Yes, of course, you can do that. We were discussing this with different, for instance, that there is the idea of the artists, the dropout artists, or the artists of the no, of the artists of the refusal artists are always, we were thinking of like Stanley Brown, many artists who refuse to have their CPE published or any images, this kind of thing. This is most of the time, of course, you need to have the privilege to be there in order to show off your dropping out. There are mostly male artists, but yeah, I mean, they're all male artists, but as in order for women to have this privilege to drop out, then you first need to be put forward. Mm-hmm. This is something that is clear. Because, and then I have to make another comment. We were discussing, for instance, such a clear case of dropping out as Lee Lozano. So when that first exhibition I saw of Lee Lozano, they say, well, she just left because she was crazy. You know, when you drop out as a woman, it's because you're crazy and you can't take the the pressure of career, and while you drop out as a humanist because you are integer. I mean, this is of course a generalization, but this is a way of understanding and kind of making a kind of a parable here. But it was clearly Lozano left because she dropped out because she was crazy.
It's quite a wild. So Natasha Boas asks, is the space between the vernissage and the finissage the new space for production?
Well, I think there should be no vernissage and no finissage. So there should be just, and the production, then we had to discuss what do we mean by production. I think it is really more the time. That was one of the things about not feeling guilty of not producing, and also, to make it, it's complex, but to make it something, as a teacher, for instance, I have always been confronted with another teacher that tells me, yes, well, I just want to be sure that my students work, but you have no means to know when an artist is working. An artist can be hammering the whole day and do absolutely nothing, and one can be staring at a wall and be in extreme production. So this is the paradox of artistic practice. And I think in that way, it's wonderful, this idea, what do you mean exactly by production? So I think that we should reformulate the ideas of vernissage and finissage. There's already no vernissage and finissage because we can't get too many people together. So already now all the exhibitions that are opening, then you just have to go there, so that you have to make an appointment. And then I think with the idea of production, since you don't have the deadline fever anymore, then probably it means something else now.
Excellent. Perfect. Our friend Philippe Pirot asks, Dear Dora, thanks so much. I totally feel familiar with what you presented. This is more of a thought than a question. I thought this time should be a time out, which would be a real time out, not productive at all. But there was so much denial and lots of people persisting in the denial. Also a lot of the art world. So the deadline seemed to persist. I had to close the school before handing it over to my successor, which was strange, but I thought it was an interesting form of reset to allow for something else. But it seemed as if people went into hibernation instead of a timeout, and would wake up after something and just continue the same way as before.
So hello, Philippe. This is a common friend of Dina and me. And yes, I mean, there is another phenomenon that I have been completely fascinated is about the people who refuse to wear masks, people who refuse to confine. We were just commenting right before the going online that it's curious that you put together people who don't believe in vaccination. Is that the right English pronunciation? Vaccination. They don't believe in vaccination. They don't believe in masks. They don't believe in confinement. They think the virus is a Chinese hoax. And those people are the same people who like to wear arms, and they are also the same people who, these people. And it is always curious that like all the idiocy in the world gets together, attract each other, and then every nonsense that you may believe, you believe it at the same time. And in Spain, of course, we also have this, and we have like everywhere, and how Brexit, for instance, and virus denial gets together. There's another fascinating thing. But some, the funny thing is that they have been called the case of Boris Johnson, converted because he almost died. Live the force of reality. The reality is not going to change just because you don't believe in it. So that's one thing. And I think something like this is also going to happen with the way things are handled in the art world, both because of what has happened and also because I think there is a new generation of people that have been completely shaped by these periods, completely shaped by what has happened. And when I say that you are going to be called out, is that called out for, the carbon imprint of your exhibition, the money you spent in these things, what is the representation that you gave to certain issues. They are going to be called out on that, and they're going to have to respond to that. And so in that sense, I think change is unavoidable. It made, like, as usual, it goes faster in some places than others, but I cannot believe that it's going to go as business as usual. That's impossible. I mean, we will have the recession also to make us come back to our senses as well.
Very real. Yes. Dana Hemingway asks, thank you both for this. I'm curious about what happened in your process practice when you stopped everything that you were doing after the mid-March closure. You expressed relief that things could stop from outside forces, but I am curious how that is manifesting for you.
So you mean what I did without outside forces pushing me? Well, I did great. I mean, in the sense that I read, I saw films. I had my, since after 1.5 months, we could walk. So this is really, I could live a life like that. I, of course, wrote a lot. So I also produced, I wrote a lot. I had some conversations online with people I appreciate a lot. So there was some production, there were some things, but everything was slowed down. And I slept, I slept a lot. Yeah.
That's everything. The body responds more than we do.
Yes, I mean, I was lucky because I didn't have economic issues. Other people have economic issues, and then it's not so pleasant in the sense that creates, of course, a lot of angst. So I was lucky. I was privileged again. It was a privilege. Yes.
Yes. Andre Thomas Contreras says, the revolution of everything and everything. What a beautiful way to end your amazing talk. Given the current race towards the apocalyptic precipice on the world space stage, are there specific ways that artists can bring about the revolution for everyone and everything? Greetings from Lake Atitlan, Guatemala.
Yes, I'm thinking about it. I can't say I have no answer to that. I have been lately, when all this happened, I was working on a film, and I will keep working on a film, which is about a revolutionary woman from the October Revolution in Russia, Alexandra Kollontai. And I find very especially interesting her diaries of the revolution, because the thing is, nobody thought that it was going to work out. So it was, it's something like if the revolution happens next to us and we have to catch up with it. She was telling that Lenin danced when the Russian Revolution lasted longer than the Commune, when the days were more than that, because it was something unbelievable. It was really something unbelievable for people at that moment, in the period in which everything seemed possible until 1921, 1922. And so I think revolution always gets you by surprise. You always astonished that this can happen. It has, with the tiny revolutions I have been able to see, there's always like, how is it possible? How is it possible? Like 10 minutes ago, everything was calm, and all of a sudden, it's like everything just started. And so I think you can't prepare for the revolution. It's impossible. You can organize, of course. You can organize, you can educate, you can teach, you can practice. But I think since they're changing things, is something that has to happen with a massive amount of people feeling that need of change. I don't think you can really prepare all of a sudden. All of a sudden it happens. And I think it also has to do a lot with events that no one previewed, like the epidemics.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So Evan Hashi asks, your sensitivity to the scale and material output of artistic work is fascinating. Exhibited artists in museum versus artists working in obscurity. The artist's visible product versus the labor and people behind it. Do you see this as a broader mandate for those who don't identify as artists as well? Should we drop out of social media or other performative forms of political engagement?
So the question is, we should drop out of social media?
It's kind of if non-artists as well should also drop out, like what do we need to drop out from? Is it a broader mandate for everyone?
But I have always been fascinated by Alan Capro and his idea that artists should stop being artists. Like, I I cannot remember. I'm sorry, I was not prepared for it. I really should have my notes at all times. Something like artists of the world unite, you have nothing to lose by your professions or something like that. And saying that, you know, this concept of Alan Capro or the incidental person of John Lafan, that's the idea. So it is an old idea that artists should stop being artists. But I was even more fascinated because I also found this idea in the October Revolution, with the idea that artists should not be artists anymore. They were just citizens. And I'm just trying to remember exactly who wrote this because I'm not sure if it was Lenin. I think it was somebody else. This idea that actually artists should be, you would be an artist sometimes. Mm-hmm. You know, you have other things and everybody would be an artist sometimes. So they had this idea that you, at a certain point, you would produce art, but you could also do a lot of other things. So it was just part of your being as a citizen. And in that period of, how you say, where the revolution was also followed by the avant-garde, which was very short, so that the avant-garde and the revolution were one in one in the October Revolution. The artists like Rodchenko or like Malevich, they really thought they would dissolve in the workers' republic. That was the idea. So it is an old idea, and you know, I think that it is so, the artistic practice is so different from one artist to the next. It is very hard to know exactly what an artist does. So for that reason, of course, I think you could stop being an artist and no one really noticing it, but because you just basically do the same things as. So I don't know. I guess I don't have any clear idea. I feel very guilty about using social media. I always think I shouldn't. Because that's what I had a friend who once told me, I never check my phone before 2 p.m. And then I was thinking, I have to do that. And I suffered trying to do that for 2 days. And then I just went back to just doing the first thing I do as soon as I open my eye. And then, and so I feel very guilty. I use them because probably I should be employ my time better, so doing something else. But I still think there's a lot of very good things in social media. Like for instance, I can check what Dina is doing, these kind of things. So it's very, that's great.
Yeah, so it's a balance, and I think we're just all looking for a more reflective space, like a space where those conversations are deeper and more intensive, and spaces of preparation and organizing. Yeah. So Francesca asks, hi Dora, thank you so much for your talk. I am now in a phase which I am almost afraid things will go back to normal, but even in a more amplified way. I was wondering how you are coping with lockdown being eased, and if you have any fear of going back to normal and a new fear of productivity. How can we resist productivity and FOMO, but still exist in the system?
Yes, I am very much afraid of the confinement. I think I wish I could be confined forever. And I also think this is something I did not mention, I had it written in my talk, when saying that if people think that only because of the virus things are going to change, is as vain as thinking that because during these days, I think the carbon dioxide went down by 4%, I think, or something like that, that this is going to last by itself. It won't. It will go back to where it was, and even will go back to worse because people have to catch up. So I think the general vibe is more stronger, like before, even more than before. So many people are I think, I saw a poster saying like from 1st of July, tourists can go back to Spain, 1,000 flights every day. And so I saw this poster, and then, as you can imagine, absolute terror, because that was also one of the wonderful things is that you have no tourists. And I have nothing against people traveling, but massive tourism is one of the biggest cancers of everything really, also of the cultural industries. So I'm afraid that I'm super afraid that things are going to go back to normal. I think they're going to really try to go back to normal or to whatever. I think they are denying an important reality by trying to go back to normal. So I don't think they will be able to do this for free or with no consequences. But I think we all have a responsibility to change it, to say no. I'm not gonna work. I'm not gonna be. It's not gonna be like it was. And as for the system, I think, you know, the system is not something external from us. The system is us. We are part of the system. So the system will change if it will change. This is where I think, this is where really I'm up to, what I will try to do.
Absolutely, yeah. So we have a couple more questions, I think. So Amelia Hawk asks, can you talk about the relationship between saying no, dropping out, and activism? Are they the same, or is activism a very different entity?
No, I think they're very different. I think an activist is absolutely not a dropout. You can change, so you can go from an artistic practice more centered in exhibiting practice, and then move to a more activist practice. But that's not a dropout. That's like a changing. I think a dropout is a very individual gesture. There are many different types of dropouts. So there are dropouts come from desperation, there are dropouts from disenchantment. For instance, I have, maybe to make it short, I was, as I say, studying the life of Kollontai. And I came to understand that actually there are 3 parts in her life, and these 3 parts are mostly the same parts of every female artist, and then or artists in general, and not only visual artists. And there are also the 3 parts of avant-garde, which is enthusiasm, disenchantment, and resistance. So this is how it is. You are enthusiastic, you know, it really, revolution is going to happen, it's going to go fantastic, whatever enthusiasm, and then you can't, you know, the disenchantment, and you can't, not because of what you thought, but because your companions tell you that you can, or don't let you, or say, well, you know, this actually is not that important, we're going to do it otherwise. Then you are disappointed, and then, but you don't, you retire, in a way, you retire from the front line, but you resist. So it is not really that you gave up. You say, okay, I'm just going to be here, and I'm going to stay put for the next chance I have. So I think this is a bit more this idea of dropout in a constructive manner is the one that really is disappointed, but doesn't stay in the disappointment, but moves into the resistance. I hope I answered.
That's great. Helen Mira says, with all respect, do you think it might be helpful for a revolution for everyone and everything to stop calling people you disagree with idiots?
Yeah, it's how to say? Well, an idiot, as you know, is originally, in the Greek original, someone who's not interested in public life. So it is not so wrong to call them idiots in that sense. I mean, of course, when I say the word idiot, I just get carried away by a way of speaking I've been listening to since I was a child. But that's what the original word idiot means. So in that sense, very often when I say idiocy, I mean people that are not interested in the common. And that's really the original meaning of the word idiocy. So in that sense, I think it's appropriate. If I may remember well, I spoke about idiocy when speaking about the people who didn't want to wear a mask and this kind of thing. So in a way, to refuse to do these things in the present condition or for the reasons they do, it is a form of idiocy because they are not thinking on the common. But sometimes I know I shouldn't call people idiots. It's not always right, but sometimes it is.
I think Diogenes would always be the idiot relationship, the dropping out in the common but without the common. Yeah, that's pretty great. Yeah, I was thinking about Thoreau's idea of civil disobedience too. Like either you withdraw your work, your labor, you withdraw your taxes, or you withdraw your sense of commonality. But I mean, these protests, like the one I went to last night, always feels like a form of idiocy in a way, because we're all kind of trying to be in common with each other, but we know that it's ineffective because there's this kind of binary thinking between us and them, and everybody's performing a role. And so, yeah, I think it's interesting how the pandemic has reframed the context for performing that role, and how we are really trying to re-engage in the study and the organizing and the small scale regional that's necessary. But yeah, so if anyone else, I don't know if I missed any questions here. Let's see. Natasha Boaz asks, could you please spell out the name of her October Revolution woman artist? I can write.
It's not an artist. It's a revolutionary.
Yeah, Alexander.
You typed it, Alexandra Kollontai?
Yeah, I don't know if hopefully I spelled it right. But I'm looking, so Dora and many others just released a beautiful book on Sternberg Press that I'm hoping to get in the mail soon, but about Alexandra's work. So it's also a form and an example of deep study, these types of thinking with and through artists.
I released a second book. So this one of the Extemper Press was one that was made together with the Curator Lab in Stockholm and Maria Lind. And because I'm researching Alexandra Kollontai in Mexico, because he was in Mexico and the impact he had in feminist, South American feminists, there is a second book that we will release in 2 weeks. Amazing. But this you will get for free, Nina. I'll send it to you.
Oh my God. Thank you. I mean, it's hard to keep up with you.
This is not just a coincidence. I rarely bring more than one book per year.
That's exciting. I mean it. I just, this chance right now to really go back to the practice of studying one thing for a long period of time and very deep into that has just been such a gift. And it's really, I mean, it's so resonant in what you were talking about today. So thank you so much. I think, do you have any final words or comments or ideas?
No, only words of thanks to you, and thanks to the people who listen. It's strange, because I'm here in my I don't know how to call that, studio, but it's a very small studio. It's more like a cabin. And I have been speaking into the void for the 40 minutes. It's very, very strange, because very strange to do that, because I was not sure if, but it has been really nice, and I especially like the questions. Thanks very much for the questions.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Please, everyone who's tuning in now, please join us for future forums. We're going to be doing one with Andre Singleton and Sadie Barnett next Saturday that deals with collective grieving, especially in the POC community, and thinking about what that looks like and how activists and artists have been grieving constantly with their work. We will also have Wu Sang speaking about conviviality. That will be later in June, I believe. And we're scheduling a few others right now. So please stay tuned and we'll have more of these. But thank you so much, Dora. Really appreciate your time and work here.
Thanks you. Okay.
All right.
Ciao.
Ciao. Bye.
Bye.